Hi, and welcome to my presentation about Arctic expeditions. So, what is considered to be Arctic? It is a polar region located at the northernmost part of the Earth. But most commonly, scientists define the Arctic as the region about the Arctic Circle, an imaginary line that circles the globe at approximately 66 degrees north. The Arctic Circle marks the latitude above which the sun does not set in the summer solstice and does not rise in the winter solstice. The Arctic is also divided into high Arctics, low Arctics, and subarctics. Other researchers define the area based on temperature. The Arctic includes any location in high latitude where the average daily summer temperature does not rise above 10 degrees. But what are Arctic expeditions? Arctic explorations are the physical explorations of the Arctic region of the Earth. These expeditions are an opportunity to explore some of the most remote and untouched places on the Earth. The expedition providers are under constant pressure from the governing and regulating bodies. It is because they are commercial providers. The market is very hard to penetrate and is heavily regulated, therefore it is considered to be an oligopoly. What are Arctic routes? There are two main routes. It's the Northwest Passage and Northeast Passage. These two passages are mainly used for shipping, however, they are also utilized by the commercial expedition providers. Other passages are mainly used by the tourism industry and are usually shorter. This is the most usual road to the North Pole. It starts in Russia, which stops at the Spitsbergen and Franz Josef Land. But what are the Arctic hotspots? It doesn't only include the North Pole. The biggest hotspots are Bear Island, Canadian Arctics, Greenland, Iceland, North Pole of course, Northwest Passage, Tromsø and Spitsbergen. This is an example of the Canadian Arctics, which has many ship points and ports. What are the types of Arctic expeditions? There are expeditions into the low Arctics, which include hotspots such as Greenland, Iceland, and wildlife cruises of Spitsbergen. Then there are expeditions into high Arctics, which require sturdier ships and equipment and also are more physically demanding. And then the ultimate Arctic adventure is to the North Pole. The tours vary in their lengths. They can last from 1 day to 29 days. However, I will focus in these presentations on trips that are longer than 7 days, 1 week. Who are the main providers? There are various providers of Arctic expeditions. However, only a handful of them venture into the high Arctics. The biggest players are Quark Expeditions, which is the market leader in the Arctic expeditions, and they have the biggest fleet of ships. Then there is Poseidon Expeditions, who are official partners with Polar Bear International and provide mainly wildlife and photography tours. The last provider is probably most known for its operation along Norway's western and northern coast and other coastal expeditions. These providers also provide activities on these cruises. These kind of activities in the most remote and unexplored regions are sometimes quite hard to organize and also to license. Therefore, the offers do not differ significantly between the providers. The most popular activities are Arctic kayaking, flight seeing and heli hiking, hot air ballooning, of course if the weather is suitable for it, zodiac cruising. In the lower regions of Arctics, it's hiking, polar plunging, glacier hiking, and also mountain biking. But what about the ships? The ships are nuclear-powered icebreakers. These are special, sturdy ships that can travel to the high Arctics. Now there are only 2 to 3 ships in the operation. It's the Captain Klebnikov and 50 Years of Victory. These both ships are not owned by the private companies. They are only operated by the expedition providers. They are not owned. Both of these ships are now in the possession of the Russian Federation. Who is the target group? The price point of these expeditions is very, very high. Therefore, the tours are considered to be luxury adventures. They can cost from $4,000 to $30,000. It's a niche and luxury product. It is also advertised as a once-in-a-lifetime adventure, and the desired customer segment is the high-income customers. But because of the growth in the segment, these tours are becoming more accessible to the people with lower incomes. And they consider it to be once-in-a-lifetime adventure as advertised and want to take part in these adventures. The unique selling proposition of these stores is very interesting because the products are so similar to each other. They are very homogeneous. And the unique selling proposition therefore shifts from the product itself to the marketing. These companies use many unique people to spread the word about the expeditions. For example, Chris Hadfield, who is a former astronaut, or Tim Kellner is a filmmaker. They let the public peek at what is possible to discover, and social media creates the want for them to see it in the real life. What are the trends? The biggest trend is the boom. It's the boom of interest in these expeditions. In 2019, 11 new expeditions were added to the fleet, and by 2020, the total number of new specially designed expedition ships will reach 28 additional. There are already 80 ships sailing in the Arctic now. And because demand drives innovations, there are new ships being developed that can venture deeper into the Arctic and other. And in the near future, there are expected to be new non-nuclear vehicles that will go through North Pole. Especially due to social media, customers become harder to satisfy and are becoming very, very demanding. The expectations rise so rapidly that the providers cannot adapt to them. They want to experience everything on their journey, however, it's not always possible. Another trend, even though external, is climate change. It can be both good and bad for the industry. It indeed helps businesses because inaccessible places become more accessible and they can use new business opportunities. It also works as a decision maker in the decision-making process of the customer because it encourages them to visit Arctic before it melts. People also want to travel to Arctic because they want to see the effects of climate change firsthand, and they want to see how the However, the same change of the ecosystem may have disastrous impacts on the industry. With the lack of wildlife and ice, the demand for the tours may decrease. What are the main impacts? The Association of Arctic Expedition Cruise Operators is an international association for expedition cruise operators operating in the Arctic and others with interest in this industry. Its main goal is to diminish the impact. These impacts are on environment, wildlife, and the people living in the Arctic. In 2004, US Commission on Ocean Policy reported that a cruise ship generates up to almost 800,000 liters of sewage water and almost 100,000 liters of oily water, which is an organization that is concerned with the marine pollution. ECO manages responsible, environmentally friendly and safe tourism in the Arctic and, most importantly, checks the operating standards and the providers. ECO also issues wildlife guidelines for the tourists to avoid disturbance of wildlife. There are many negative impacts from vessel operations that include physical injury, interference with disruption of normal behavior, inducing stress on the animals, creating underwater noise, and also increased exposure to predators. When dead animals are encountered, they have to be recorded and reported to ECO, and any animals that are entangled in fishing equipment should be assisted where possible. Regions in the low Arctics and high Arctics are populated by small, diverse communities. These communities can create their own guidelines with the help of the template for development of community-specific guidelines. By implementing these guidelines and other policies, the communities can sustain their traditional ways of life. Another guideline document is the Code of Conduct. It lays out simple rules to follow by the operators and tourists in order to preserve the fragile region of Arctics. Maybe the most important guideline to follow, that is also mandatory to follow, is the operational guidelines of ECO. Because they operate in various regions and countries, they have to follow national and local regulation. ECO members must adhere to all applicable laws and regulations. Maritime operations of ships and cruise activities are regulated through national and international legislation, in particular the Comprehensive Convention System adopted by UN organization, International Maritime Organization, concerning safety at sea, pollution, management systems, and liability. Members of ECO must ensure that ships owned or chartered by members are operated according to relevant maritime international and local laws and regulations. They also have to sign the Travel and Tourism Declaration on Illegal Trade in Wildlife and the Arctic Commitment, which is a ban on use and carriage of heavy fuel oil in the Arctics. Conclusions. The industry is homogeneous and has oligopoly tendencies. It is heavily regulated with the priority of sustaining the ecosystem. However, the ecosystem is changing and therefore the policies has to be adjusted to the new state of the area. The providers have more access to the remote locations, which can endanger animals, communities, and the safety of the passengers. Now, the climate change plays well with the industry. It is growing and innovating. How will it change and how it will impact the demand for Arctic adventures in the far future is uncertain. However, the trends and data show that the growth does not show any tendencies of slowing down. The industry is in its early stages of development. It is facing and will face many challenges, but in order to preserve the ecosystem, innovation hand in hand with law and regulation should ensure that the disruption is minimal and the tourism is nature friendly. Thank you very much.